Hi, I'm Sandeep, and you're watching the Indian Weekender. As you know, that National Party has just now launched its new and much awaited border protection policy. And in fact, the policy is being just launched right now, and National Leader Judith Collins is in the middle of a press conference after launching the policy, answering the questions of curious journals. So we here at Indian Weekender team just thought to have a quick chat, and I'm joined by our editor at large, Dev Nadkarni, this morning. Thanks for joining us, Dev. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks.
So my first question to you is that do you now feel more secure after listening to what National has said about their border policy?
Not necessarily, because there's a big gap between policy and the developing situation. Because if you remember, the policy now talks a lot about based on hindsight of what has happened, and it's yet to be costed. Also, it's a very developing situation, so it's very hard to really say that something will work the way based on this situation that has just happened. And it clearly looks like Labour has dropped the ball in the 100 days that it had to really shore up policy. So in that sense, things look a little bit fluid, and this is just a policy. So there's no reason for me to really feel reassured or anything. How about you?
Oh, well, I think, yeah, you have quite rightly said that, and probably I won't disagree a lot with you. We all agree that probably there has been some dropping of ball by the government. But again, to be fair to government, it is, as you said, it is a fast evolving situation. And with the government and different agencies, they are just trying to come up with the best response. Plus, they have to also take into account the cost of human error, and which probably National's policy, despite taking a hindsight view, have not addressed that how they are going to address that human error element in that. And yeah, coming back to that, it is definitely a fluid situation. Government has dropped some ball, but and National is trying to take some gain out of that, which is quite right thing. We can expect that from opposition. But the thing is that they need to do their homework well and come up with a policy that is reassuring and innovative as well. So probably, yeah, I think we kind of agree both on that. But I would like to take a little bit, I would say, a leap back into last week of politics, and then we will again come back and end up our discussion with this policy. So if we recall that last time we had a discussion was on a Friday just before Prime Minister Aran was going to launch, and I think we both were quite right in guessing that kind of scenario that we are going to there. So how would you like to evaluate Prime Minister's performance on that day? uh, Given that she was in the middle of a lot of criticism and pressure from opposition.
Yeah, I think if you've watched parliamentary proceedings over the last 1 week, ever since this happened, there is a marked difference which I've noticed in the body language. As the border failures came to light, you could see the Prime Minister being not her usual ebullient self on the floor of the Parliament.
True.
And for the first time since this whole thing unfolded, she looked kind of vulnerable
True.
and open to attack. And I would think that in a sense that it is justified. Whatever might be the reason when the whole thing is investigated and found out, the fact remains that the testing of people who potentially came in contact with people who were quarantined is abysmally low, and that's not very good. And that was quite reflected in how the Prime Minister's body language at
True.
least spoke to me.
No, you're quite right, and I think that is something that has been felt by one and all. I think, and that is where probably all opposition they are trying to pounce upon and take that advantage. But again, being a little bit more fairer to the government as well, which we would say has done relatively good job in managing the first wave of the crisis. I personally feel that there are only two things: either they knew the real truth that there is a direct linkage between uh, the second wave emanating from the border, leakage in the border, right, which they have yet not confessed in public. So is there something they know that is making them defensive in their approach and their engagement in the parliament? Or I would say that they have suddenly probably gone into too much of defensive, fearing about being punished by the voters in the coming elections. So something is playing up in their mind, which probably we don't know at this stage. What do you think?
Well, one clue to this, it may or may not be true, but after the cold storage facility managing director from Australia clearly said that there was no shipment to Auckland over the last several months, somehow the health ministry persisted that there has got to be a link. So that kind of lays the government open to criticism whether it was a diversionary tactic. They knew something was happening, that there was a problem at the border, but they wanted to kind of shift the blame if possible. And just today it has come out that the cold storage thing has had no link. So
no, you're quite right.
That kind of lays it open to criticism, may or may not be the truth.
Sure. No, you're quite right in that. And probably I want to simplify our conversation for the benefit of our normal audience and try to think it from a naive common man's perspective, I would say that. Okay. Because the language that we have been using, it's probably the language of politicians, journals, experts, medical things, right? Because don't you think, like over here, what government is trying to claim or trying to plead to common people out there, that they are trying to deal with the virus, which is very tricky, and managing and guarding that virus along with our borders, which probably is a tricky task, and it is a work in progress, and there is no prepared recipe that government can actually follow that. So do you want to give that benefit of doubt to government at all?
I would absolutely think so, and I'm glad you brought this up, because just how unprecedented this whole situation is can be gauged from the Supreme Court decision the other day, just day before yesterday, saying that the whole thing was illegal, and after 9 days it was regularized with the proviso that what was done was absolutely necessary. Fair enough. From that point of view, yes, the government needs the benefit of it, and there's no doubt that it has.
Fair enough. And again, coming back to that High Court thing that was raised by a lawyer, well, like all experts, basically, who are quite, I would say, fascinated by the question of legality, or just for the academics point of view. Probably for a common man's perception, that might not even be a question that is this illegal or not. Probably the narrative that they were being thrown upon was that probably by going into lockdown will save their life, and they were happy to do that. Absolutely. Isn't it?
It was a technicality, and I think the court hastened to add that pretty strongly, saying that there was, it was absolutely justified, so it was all right.
Sure.
And then, of course, Labour, they didn't need to, but they said that, but we didn't break the law, we didn't arrest anybody. Or
of course. I think you're quite right in that, and thanks for bringing that issue, that we see that probably that is also stopping government to act expeditiously, according to the expectations of our opposition parties. When the last 2 weeks we have seen there have been a lot of drama, a lot of pressure from opposition, and criticism of government for failing to go for 100% testing of frontline staff workers over there. But probably government, which have actually, once they have burned their fingers by going into lockdown without having a legal precedence, probably they would have been a little bit shy to impose that jurisdiction that they can do that 100% testing and force people to go for testing, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah,
that's right. Yes.
So now coming to just have a look on the politics side of things, how things are unfolding. And so what do you think, in your worldview, I would say, who or which party is doing better than what they have done in the previous past?
I think the policy which was declared today, it's as I said, it had the benefit of hindsight over what has happened in the last 2 weeks. But you must remember that it was the same National Party which was pressing hard for travel bubbles.
True.
And that would have made border testing all the more, so much more difficult.
In fact, sorry to interrupt you, Dev, just because you have tempted me to comment on that, probably I'm still not very clear about National's whole view towards managing this COVID-19. At some point, at very initial thing, when they were very inspired with what's happening across our trans-Tasman border, they were forcing government not to follow a complete elimination strategy and rather adopt what's happening in Australia and other parts of the world, right? And then suddenly, out of the blue, what we are seeing is that in every press release or in every statement, they do support government's elimination strategy. But alongside that, they are asking or trying to put pressure on government for being unfair on small businesses that are being forced.
Right.
Well, again, that is a very difficult pill. Like probably no government would like to close businesses or disadvantage one section into another section, I would say.
Yep.
It's a very difficult task to manage, in which probably government is also not succeeding fully. We completely agree with that.
Yeah.
We completely sympathize with our small businesses which have been forced to close. But again, when we are seeing the greater good, I don't think opposition is doing any better than government by presenting a very clear plan, vision, and strategy.
Yeah. One of the things which sets apart New Zealand from the rest of the world is go hard, go early.
Sure.
And what Judith Collins said today goes completely against that. Sure. Although the National Party broadly agrees with go hard and go early,
yes,
because it succeeded where nothing else has.
Sure.
Today, the leader of the National Party said that lockdowns should be the very last resort.
Definitely.
Now that goes against the grain of go hard, go early, and this is where every single country where the sting, as they say, of COVID, the second wave has come and hit, has happened because they just postponed.
Well, just to give more perspective and example to our audiences, probably this happened in Victoria and Melbourne.
That's right.
They were really managing their the first wave of COVID-19 quite nicely,
right.
But when the second wave struck, probably they didn't go very hard and early. They didn't opt for lockdown, and then probably they waited for weeks and weeks.
That's right.
And then probably result is out there.
Correct.
And again, it's not to credit our government too much in the debate between opposition and the government, but I think probably opposition needs to be more accountable as well, isn't it?
Correct. Yes.
Right. Okay. So again, coming back to my question that has still not been answered, if we have to say and evaluate, like on the government side, we have got three parties: Prime Minister Ardern's Labour Party, Green James Shaw, and our I would say indomitable Winston Peters with New Zealand First, and the opposition we have got National and ACT. So if you have to fare them how they have been doing in last 2 weeks, what would be your broader idea?
First of all, Winston Peters, whose side is he on?
Well, that's a very good one. That's a very good one. And just to give a little bit more perspective, do you want to say what Winston Peters has said this morning?
Yes, he's talking. He's got his own border policy for New Zealand First. And of course, you know, at a fundamental level, Winston Peters often makes perfect sense. And he says that, you know, the army could have been brought in fairly early, and it could have saved a lot of mega dollars in terms of you know, taking this entire quarantine facility in army barracks and stuff like that. But at the same time, you must remember that if that had been done and the hotels had been ignored totally, that would have increased the whole problem of unemployment and
Obviously.
You know, people losing their jobs and things like that in those quarantine hotels. Those quarantine hotels are existing because of this whole problem, and this is why people are still in so many jobs. So it's not just well thought out.
Definitely. And just sorry to interrupt you. Just to add on that, I don't know, like probably what Mr. Peters is saying, or again, he has the benefit of hindsight now to say what he has said previously in a few months, but I don't know if there was an appetite with the New Zealand public to be quarantined in army style. We are talking about a first-rate developed world. People out there, you know, as we know that they are not in a habit of being told to stay at home or their freedoms to be quarantined or taken away. So for them, the struggle is at a different level. We are not talking about a country like India, probably, where armed forces and police and law enforcement agencies, they have greater sway. In public, they have greater appetite and greater belief in those systems, and they surrender themselves very quickly. So we don't know as of now as well. Probably we are into second wave, and then we don't know how public appetite changes. That's a different story, isn't it?
Yeah. That's right. I mean, you can't compare India, because in India, you know, if the policy doesn't work, you can use a lathi, and that's justified.
Fair enough. Well, yeah, that's again different scale. That's a different scale of problem.
Can't really
over there.
compare.
Yes, of course. Like 5 million is a small town over there.
Yeah, that's right. Maybe
Right.
a suburb.
A suburb, yes. Now coming back to your ratings, so you were talking about Winston Peters, and then
I think Labour has been caught on the wrong foot. There is some blame, I think, that can be apportioned to Labour, because 102 days without a case, there was plenty of time to audit the whole process and see whether this could have happened. I think there's lots of people who are very intelligent and who could predict these things. There's scientists there. Everyone's working together in unison, which is a very beautiful thing to see in New Zealand, being a small country. So everyone, there's a lot of ideas available for each other, and I think in that sense, that 102 days was wasted in not really. This was bound to come up at some stage.
Well, again, I completely agree with you, and that is probably the general expectation out there as well. But just out of curiosity, now actually we are hearing a lot of our epidemiologists and experts who are saying that probably we have wasted 102 days. But in those 102 days, I haven't heard any commentary from those experts questioning that why government is wasting their time and not doing a quick review process. So again, just trying to be fair to the debate, probably, again, this is the hindsight view, isn't it? Probably those experts could have suggested or advised to government that a review is in the order and the second wave will be coming. In fact, to be very fair, like, when suddenly 2 or 3 weeks prior to this second wave, when government started that whole narrative that second wave is imminent, it's coming, and that is when probably the opposition national and their campaign manager Jerry Brownlee, actually, he came with an astounding suggestion, suggesting some conspiracy theory. Probably nobody was even mentally ready as well that second wave can happen again in New Zealand. Right. So probably we all are guilty in that space, isn't it?
I think so, yes. And I don't think Jerry Brownlee has done any favors to the National Party.
Sure, definitely. Yes. Now coming back to so you said Labour is a little bit off color, and then what else about other parties and other leaders?
Well, National has been all at sea, and they've had their own internal issues. And I think in this whole thing, the rising star in terms of sound bites, as well as making sense, as well as being out there, is ACT.
Fair enough. You have taken away my words.
David Seymour has been a voice of reason throughout.
Surely.
And I think he has said all that very well. And just this morning, just before we came here, I read another statement of his saying that the white-anting politics within the politicians within National have to be let go, and I think it's absolutely right. Those white-anting politicians have really ruined that party, especially in the run-up to this particular
Definitely.
election.
And just to add on that and advise and tell our viewers that we have lined up to speak with David Seymour sometime next week, probably for the reason that he has been the lone voice of reason, and probably reading his press releases that comes from his office, probably they are really a good read these days. So definitely he is doing well. And now coming back to Winston's, you have already read a nice question that.
That's right.
Which side he is, because these days he's playing from probably more towards center right and trying to see what happens after the elections, isn't it? And any views on James Shaw and his Green Party?
Yeah, I think he's been more aligned towards Labour than anyone else. Definitely more than Winston Peters, and I think he's raised some very good points, especially this coming to Labour's aid in this particular thing in the last 1 week, saying that it's very easy for National to come up with these sorts of pronouncements when just a few weeks ago they were absolutely championing the cause of the bubble.
Fair enough. No, true.
So I think that natural ally thing has been reinforced, and it probably makes it easier or natural for both the allies to stay in that bond.
Sure.
Coming up for the election.
Sure. Now, but the thing is, the second wave of COVID-19, apart from opening up, I would say, challenges, Pandora box of challenges, I would say, like we are losing around 250 jobs, 75 million every day. That's what economists are saying. But apart from that gloomy side, probably it has made the electoral battle a little bit more interesting because probably a month ago Prime Minister was impregnable stage, like her party was able to govern by herself. That were the polls, but it would be interesting to see if we can see one round of polls before we go to elections in October 17.
What do you mean, one round of polls?
Like probably if we can see the polls, Colma Brunton or News Hub.
Oh, that sort of thing.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So probably that will give us an idea that how much this second wave of COVID-19
perhaps it will, yes.
has affected her popularity, the trust in the government,
yes.
And then probably we will be in a better place to evaluate like how elections will be unfolding.
Yeah. Now, one important point, I think we need to also say what's happened in the last 2 weeks, and that is Jacinda Ardern's decision, which has been, throughout absolutely unanimously been praised for, putting off the election by 1 month.
Sure.
For exactly the same reasons. Politically, Labour Greens stand to lose because there's so much time to regroup. There's also more negative stuff coming up now. Vulnerability coming up now, and it was a bold decision, and I think it was in the interest of democracy that she did that.
Definitely.
It could have been done 2 weeks, but she said no, she didn't. I mean, it could have easily been 2 weeks. No one's going to ask her.
Fair enough.
But she did it.
Definitely, and I completely agree with that.
In that sense, I think you have to give her credit for that.
Of course, and no, that's I think a positive note to end this probably a little bit gloomy discussion today, because regardless, we are still in the middle of second wave of COVID-19. Security is paramount interest, and we need to see our people safe first, and then of course economy rebounding as well.
Right, but if you're speaking of gloomy, did you see Bill Gates's?
No, actually I didn't.
Oh yeah, he says that millions of people will die before COVID finally leaves in the end of 2021. Oh. How's that for gloomy?
Oh, okay. Well, that's a little bit too gloomy. But I think probably we need to end this discussion now and leave for the rest. So thanks for joining us today, Dave. I really appreciate that. And I think our viewers would have loved this analysis as well.
Hope so.
And please send us your questions about this fast unfolding situation. We are more than happy to analyze and bring out fresh perspective on that. Thank you very much.